Hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming today. I'm Dara Klarfeld. I have the privilege and honor of being the CEO of DRG Talent Advisory Group. Just some quick introductions and instructions before we begin today. So first, please submit questions via the Q&A tool on the bottom of the menu of your Zoom window. If you have comments and suggestions that are not questions, you can submit them via the chat tool, also on the bottom of your Zoom window. So thank you so much for being here. As I said, I'm Dara Klarfeld, the CEO of DRG Talent Advisory Group, which is really an honor and privilege to work at this extraordinary company where we are focused day in and day out on talent and assisting talent in the nonprofit sector specifically. This is a remarkable and unprecedented time in the world for all of us. And we wanted to have the opportunity to reach out to the field and to respond in a way that would allow people to ask questions and for us to answer anything that you wanted to know from us about the things that we are hearing and seeing from our colleagues, from our clients in the nonprofit sector, to talk broadly about leadership at this particular moment and anything else that you think we can be helpful with or that might be relevant to you, your nonprofit, a board that you sit on, or this moment in general. So our work as a talent advisory group for the nonprofit community really allows us to dig deep with nonprofits to help to organize, identify, and strengthen talent in the nonprofit sector, which ultimately really allows us to help our clients to multiply their impact in the community. And impact today for nonprofits is equally as important as it was months before this unique situation hit, and maybe even more so now. It's just that the impact has shifted, and the way in which we begin to think about impact and our clients think about impact has shifted. And therefore, we have this enormous charge to all people to shift the way in which we think about our talent, ourselves as professionals, as leaders, managers, people who are working with human services organizations, to reframe, retool, and rethink about what is important, how can we be nimble, in the way that we can continue to develop our impact on the communities that we seek to serve. I wanted to just start before we fielded questions by saying three things that I've been thinking about and that we as a team at DRG have been thinking a lot about in terms of what's happening in the world and what we're hearing from our nonprofits and some of the things that we really think are helping us kind of through these days and these moments. So the first is that people always must come first. And this is something that we live by, and this is really the core value of our work all the time. But now more than ever, the human side of this, the people engines that are building and growing capacity of organizations to be able to be multiplier impactors on the world is more important now more than ever. And the way in which we treat our people, the way in which we communicate with our teams, the way in which we provide guidance, the opportunities for us to really get to know our team in ways in which we've never had the opportunities before. We are allowing each other windows into our lives so we can see even sort of a larger, more transparent part of each of our individual lived narratives and our own individual humanity. This is an opportunity for us to really place people first and to really identify how people live, how people come to their work. And in the nonprofit sector, people-to-people operations is really the most critical thing. So placing people first and always is of critical importance at this time. The second thing that we've been thinking about with many of our clients is about how our organizations in the nonprofit sector can work together with their teams to find a way forward. There has never been a time where we have been more in this together. All of our teams the entire sector, our individual geographic communities, our family units, our global community. And so now is the time for us to make decisions together, to be collaborative, to think out loud, to share ideas, to think about issues that are important to us at this particular moment, and to use our collective wisdom to begin to problem solve. This is an unbelievably immersive experience for those of us who function on teams, to be able to go through all of this together, and the way in which we treat each other and the way in which we can collaborate around this particular moment will be incredibly instructive for how we see ourselves coming through on the other side. So our team is thinking about how we can help nonprofits to work together to find a way forward and to use this opportunity to really find the best of all of your team and to problem solve together and to make sure that you're building pathways. And the last piece that we've really been thinking a lot about, and our nonprofit clients have been asking us a lot, is about the long view. What happens next? What happens when we emerge from this? The world will most certainly look different, feel different. We will have a recovery period of which we are very, very uncertain. And taking the long view when you're in a nonprofit is of particular importance. It is essential for us to try not to panic when making decisions, but to use, again, our collective wisdom to think about how we can manage the day-to-day of this, but not to lose sight of what is over the horizon, because there will be a new day. Many of the needs that our nonprofit clients were trying to meet and that we were trying to meet as global citizens will still be there after this pandemic is over. And it is incredibly important for us not only to focus on the here and now, but to take a much broader view and a broader look, and to take some time to really be planful and mindful, particularly as it relates to our people and our talent teams, about what that long view would look like, and to begin to plan for the future. So those are some of the things that we've been thinking about. I'll invite anybody who wants to ask questions for us about leadership, about future planning, about this time of uncertainty, and of course about the nonprofit sector, hiring, et cetera, anything that we can help with. So one of the first questions that has been fielded to us is this question of, are people hiring? I think that there is a lot of confusion out there about who's hiring and what is hiring. We have seen even this morning the unemployment rates are skyrocketing. And in the nonprofit sector, I think that hiring managers and CEOs and boards of directors are really struggling with taking that long view and thinking about how to both think about how to manage and serve the communities that they reach today, while also thinking about the future. And so the answer is, we see people hiring. We see clients calling us and saying that we need help. We need additional support. We need time right now to be able to rethink some of our opportunities. We need time right now to make sure that we can think about what is going to be in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 18 months to be ahead of the curve. We see our clients saying things like, I'm a little bit fearful of hiring, but I am going to push through and try to make sure that our organization can stay stable, that we can provide resources to the people who are in need through our nonprofit, and to continue to push through. We also see in hiring that people who are engaged in searches that were in the midway point when this all happened, that many of them are thinking very strategically about how to continue those searches and how to pivot to Zoom. And some of the most successful and bold and self-reflective CEOs and boards and organizations are those that are thinking, how can we continue to move down the path of hiring to make sure that we don't lose track and pace of where we are? And particularly, we see a lot of hiring around fundraisers. that organizations are thinking about what's next and can see that when this is over, that there will be a need to rebuild and to refocus, and that having great talent in resource development will be of critical importance to the success moving forward. So somebody just asked, in terms of the long view and collaboration, are we hearing that organizations are revisiting strategic plans, priorities, or even staff organization structure? And the answer to that is yes. We see that all the time. We see organizations who are extraordinarily thoughtful, working in coordination with their boards to think, how do we plan for this so that we can exist in this moment, so that we can be nimble, so that we can reshape, so that we can make sure that we are using the people that we have, the talent who are currently in our infrastructure, to maximize on the skills that they have, and to allow them to potentially change their portfolio a little bit for the moment, to be able to differentiate between sort of their management portfolios previously, to build on new skills and talent. And as I said before, this is a great time for us to explore who we have on our team and to really get to know what skills, talents, and opportunities people have on their teams. And the opportunity to kind of rethink the structure of your organization will be incredibly important. We've also had a lot of inquiries around mergers of nonprofit organizations, because some of the nonprofits where budgets are $1 million or smaller, or $2 million or smaller, are thinking appropriately so about thinking about mergers with organizations who do like-minded work in the sector, and how can they think at this moment to use this moment to maximize sharing resources and pursuing joint ventures to be able to have that impact. So we definitely see a lot of those things and a lot of reshaping of the talent ecosystem in organizations. And we've spent a lot of time with organizations helping them to think through about who they have on their teams and how they can maximize the work that they can do and their talented professionals internally to help them to manage the day-to-day through this, and particularly for planning for the future. Meredith asks, how do we find the balance of being transparent with our staff on the uncertainty we are facing as an organization and not scaring them, especially for our younger staff? So I love this question, Meredith, and this is something that I think about all the time. I think as a CEO, excuse me, I think as a CEO, it is important for our messaging to be both positive and transparent and also realistic. I think anything less than that will rightly not be perceived as authentic. I think this is one of the most unique times in history where we are really all in this together. And so to provide false hope or to provide panic, to be panicked, neither of those are particularly helpful. I think when you are managing a team who are in different stages and phases in life, that it is essentially important to have as much individualized communication as you can possibly have with them. We don't know all the time what happens in people's lives, where their economic status is, what is behind them in terms of family support, or where their concerns, anxieties, or worries are. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. It cannot be just messaging to your organization broadly. I think that it really requires a transparent sense of a pathway forward that gives an optimal and, of course, realistic picture of where the organization is at. And then I think it really is about relationships. And as a manager supervisor, I think it is extraordinarily important to take time to check in on people, to listen very carefully to their anxieties, to their concerns, because you'll hear them differently from somebody who is in their mid-20s, who is just starting out on their career, to somebody who is in their 70s, 60s, or 70s, who is thinking about what's happening next. And so I really think this is deeply relational. So my thought on that is really to see as much as you possibly can to make sure that there is one-on-one relational, face-to-face, Zoom-to-Zoom conversations as much as possible, And I cannot emphasize sort of the well-being check-ins. Hi, how are you? How are things? I don't think that you can expect that team members will be able to save their data for supervision, and that once a week during your prescribed 30 minutes, that will be the time that they can be allowed, that they should be allowed to sort of unpack and unfold whatever it is that they feel like. I do think that it needs to be much more iterative like that. I think that you have to recognize that we all have moments of up and down, and I think that our team members do also. And so I think regular check-ins and spontaneous check-ins and allowing availability for people to be in touch with you as much as possible or as often as needed, I think is really, really critical. Heidi asked, how can we online connect with one another for support and resources? Which I think is amazing. It's an amazing question to ask, and I think there are so many resources out there through digital media. And I want to just say that I think some of the most important resources of support are actually informal in nature. I think now is a great time for you to activate your networks, people that you trust in the sector, people that you've known, people that you've built relationships with. We have found on our team that when we call people with whom we've worked with in the past, or with whom we have sought ideas or concepts or brainstorming in the past, that people are enormously receptive. The era of generosity is upon us in terms of people-to-people connection. Because we are working together apart, I think people are much more open than that. So one of the things I think that we can do to help Heidi is that we can collate some of those resources and push those out to everybody, the ones that we think are really the most helpful. And as individuals, I think it would be of critical importance to maximize on those networks, to think about the kinds of people who you really trust in your kitchen cabinet, and to ask for a few minutes of their time, because I assure you that they are also asking people for a few minutes of their time as they go through this. Cindy is asking about expenses, which are naturally going to shift quite a bit during this all digital season. How do you recommend we invest our resources to build a firm foundation? So I go back to relationships on this. Nonprofits, particularly when you're thinking about resource generation, it is entirely about relationships, as it is under the best of circumstances. And now I think it is of critical importance to continue to build your base of support by continuing to maintain those relationships. It is a difficult financial time for so many of us. And so for many of our donors who are feeling uncertain or afraid, and so many of our board members who are just not sure quite what is over the horizon, but everybody is able to continue to be relational. And I think the more exposed and authentic that we can be with our philanthropic partners, with our major donors during times like this, I think that investing our resources in allowing our teams of people to continue to maintain and to build those relationships, I think it will be enormously important for people when we come out of this. And that goes back to sort of taking this long view, that we have maintained and even used this opportunity to strengthen those relationships. That by no means will solve for the immediacy of cash flow, or solving for the immediacy of how do we meet our campaign goals, or how do we think about reverting our benefit to being an online benefit. There are a tremendous number of resources out there and enormously clever ways that I have seen people think about all of these, but I really believe that the core of all of this is to maintain clear, consistent communication with your funders, with the people who are your supporters, with your board members, and to make sure that you understand that this is a moment for you to continue to build on those relationships. Christopher asked, he is a senior level job seeker from the commercial sector, potentially looking to transition into the association nonprofit sector. During these challenging times, what recommendations do you have for those attempting to shift sectors? So This is a situation that we come up with all the time. People are constantly reaching out to us saying that they want to make the transition from the commercial sector into the nonprofit or association world. And we are always thrilled to have those conversations with people who come to a realization at a certain point in their life that they really want to be part of making an impact on a particular community, and sort of matching the values of the way that they live their lives with their values in the workplace. And we're always thrilled to hear people are interested in doing that. I think there are a number of ways that you can think about that at this particular moment. So one is, I think that nonprofits, more now than ever, need to be thinking like businesses. There has been a shift over the past decade or so for nonprofits to really coming to the realization that high-functioning nonprofits really do, in many ways, function more like businesses. And I think that it is incredibly impactful to be able to bring a lot of that business savvy, that business experience, and that business acumen to the nonprofit world. So I do think that there is always opportunity to be able to bring that. At this particular moment, I think that a lot of nonprofits will be more risk averse in hiring people who are transitioning from one sector to the other. And I think it's really important for job seekers like you to be able to draw those lines of comparison and to be really able and clearly to demonstrate on your LinkedIn profile, on your resume, in writings, when you apply for positions, to draw those lines of comparison for them, to demonstrate how the work that you've done in your previous life can really deeply apply to helping them to multiply their impact in the work that they are trying to do. Oftentimes, nonprofits don't think broadly enough to see that, and oftentimes career transition thinkers from the business community to the nonprofit world don't do a good enough job of explaining what their core skills actually are and how they can see themselves applying those core skills. The other thing that I would say, and this is really broadly for everybody again, is activating your networks is key. Keeping your networks alive and open and fluid at this particular moment is one of the single most important things that you can do. It will help you with idea generation. It will help you with meeting people. It will help you to understand the context in which all of these organizations are existing in a globalized world. And I think that it will really, really give you some very good data about how to present yourself when you are thinking about making that shift or going after a particular job. Richard asks, do you sense there will be an accelerated dependence on consultant-specific skill experts like digital fundraising, et cetera, over staff skill building amongst nonprofits? So part of me wants to say yes, and part of me wants to say no on this. I don't think that we have any sense of what the recovery will look like, whether the recovery is going to be a U or the recovery is going to be an upside down V in many of these nonprofit communities. What I can say is that I would hope that nonprofits would think very, very carefully about taking stock of the talent that they do have internally now, that they would work on doing talent audits, that they would think about asking the people who are already employed with them, what other skills do you have? How can we help you to build and learn to pivot quickly internally so that you can help us to resource ourselves appropriately without having to lay off people and create new positions? So I think that would be the first thing that I would hope nonprofits would do, which would be to think about maximizing who you have on your team already. I also think that it will be very important for nonprofits who don't have those skills internally to make appropriate financial decisions when trying to plug in or to enhance some of those particular skill sets that they are missing, or particular ideas or skills that they'll need as part of a complement to their team to be able to take the long view and to be able to move forward through all of this. So I would hope that it would be the first, and that would sort of be the first line that nonprofits would take. I anticipate that it will be the second, that nonprofits will turn to sometimes less expensive, shorter term consultants to be able to plug in on areas of expertise. I think a combination of both of those things is likely what we are looking for. And I really cannot underscore enough to encourage organizations to look deeply in the talent that they currently have, to see who is there, to see how you can help to build them and grow them and allow them to pivot at this particular moment. Deborah asks if DRG is continuing its recruitment process for chief financial officers. How are interviews being conducted during this current climate? So the answer to your first question is yes. We have seen the majority of our clients continue down their hiring path, particularly in areas that are touching finances and development, but also in human service organizations. A lot of those organizations that they have seen that their need has skyrocketed, and that the work that they're doing in the community they cannot keep up with, because there is such a great unfortunate need for so many of the things that we are seeing. The pandemic is really an economic disequalizer, and there is no better time now than for us to have our eyes wide open to see the economic inequalities in the world. And human service organizations, to their credit, are doing their absolute best to step up and step in to help the constituents which they serve. So many of our clients are continuing down this path for multiple reasons. One is that they have a real need that they need to fill. You cannot manage a $50 million human services organization without a chief financial officer. It is a primary function. And so our clients are continuing to work and build. We continue to recruit. We see candidates who are available and do not seem to be unafraid about making big decisions in terms of moving organizations from at this particular moment. The candidates are really digging into saying, I want to go where I can be most helpful and to be most impactful. In contrary, we actually see an uptick in people who are thinking, how can we help and how can I move my work to a sector that feels more impactful at this particular moment. And to the interview question about whether or not we are, about people who are conducting interviews during this current climate. So the answer to that is yes. Zoom is an unbelievable tool. I think that interviews during this period can absolutely continue to be conducted. I think it is really important for us as a company that we guide our clients on best practices with Zoom interviews to make sure that we are getting as much as we possibly can out of the interview, that we are allowing candidates to feel as comfortable as they possibly can, to discount everybody's current situation for when your child walks into the room behind you and everybody has a good laugh over that, or when everybody's background is not as pretty or as aesthetic as we'd like it to be, and of course the technical difficulties. But we see a very strong continuance in interviewing, using Zoom as the powerful tool that it is. The one thing that we are seeing that we have to workshop very carefully with each of our individual clients is really signing a deal with candidates that you have not met face to face. Some organizations are national and have a more willingness to do that because people were working remotely regardless. Other organizations are thinking about going all the way down the lane and then sort of signing but making a later start date so that they can have the opportunity to see people in person. And some candidates are appropriately concerned about taking a position where they do not have the opportunity to sit face to face, but are very willing to go all the way down the lane in the hopes that by the time they get to be able to become the candidate of choice, that they will really be able to meet their hiring manager, their CEO, their board members in person before they really begin all of this work. I have time for one more question. Ken is asking, through difficult times like this, have you seen many smaller nonprofits freezing their hiring or increasing layoffs? If so, do you see larger NPOs increasing leadership roles? The answer is, I think it's a little too early to tell. I think that a lot of smaller nonprofits are going to suffer around this, and I have seen a lot of innovation around things like how can they merge, or how can they pull every possible lever or resource that they have with board members, with funders, with loan forgiveness. I think that the PPP tomorrow, when people are finally able to apply for it, I think will be incredibly instructive when that comes down to allowing people to sort of see and maintain how long the course can go. I might answer this question differently 3 days from now, a week from now, or a month from now. I think the answer is that nobody completely knows. I think that we are anticipating and preparing for the possibility of tremendous number of layoffs in the nonprofit sector. And I think that I believe that many of our clients are so wise and have such deep relationships with their funders, and that philanthropists are stepping up to the moment, that they are trying to help organizations to think strategically, to think smartly, and to really pull every possible lever before we have to see any of those layoffs to sort of come into play. Okay, I'll answer one more question. There are two questions here about retirement, or working longer or later for retirement, and ageism being a factor for many who want to continue working. Can we anticipate ageism to dissipate? So I would really hope so. And I think this is actually a great place for us to end by answering that question. I think that there is a moral clarity that is provided during moments of crisis that we all need to hang on to. Just because COVID-19 has overtaken our lives should not and cannot give us permission to forget all of the important things that we have been working towards: diversity, equity, and inclusion, to the fight against ageism, the fight against sexism, all of those things. We can actually pay attention to both of these things. And in fact, we have a moral imperative to pay attention to all of these things. We cannot allow this particular global crisis at this particular moment to distract us from all of the other things that we think are so important and are really our guiding North Stars. So I don't know that I can answer broadly about ageism dissipating. I would hope that nonprofits and people who are doing all of this work, and board members who are deeply supportive of all these nonprofits and who are really at the core of the hiring process, would begin to think very carefully that this is not just a moment about COVID-19 and thinking about how we are going to do this, but that is a reflective moment for us to really think about how we can continue to push our values forward, how we can continue to be about people first and always, how we can really work together, all of us in this global connected universe, to really find a way forward. And the last thing is, I'll end with where I start, was for all of us to try to remain calm, to not panic, and to really take the long view. I think all of our nonprofits, all of our team members will be grateful and will be beneficial as we pull each other together through this very difficult time. So I want to say thank you so much to everybody for doing this. This is our first webinar, and I really appreciate all of your questions. The most important thing really for everybody is to stay safe and healthy, to find time for yourselves to take deep breaths. And I want to say particular gratitude to my team at DRG Talent Advisory Group for being an outstanding group of professionals, for crowdsourcing answers with me on this as we prepared for this today. And we hope to see everybody soon. Thanks.